Good morning, I'm Stan Albert and we're here at the Ste Agathe Historical Society introducing our new display on Les Petites Écoles d'Agatha. This is a short history of the rural schools before they were moved to create Montfort School, to the village itself. The convent was overfilled with students. It was L'École du District, was run by the Daughters of Wisdom, and they seemed to be overwhelmed with students, and the majority of students were out in the back roads, and they went to these private little schools, or these little rural schools. The people involved with moving the schools were Father Robitaille, who loaned the town of Ste Agathe $30,000 from parish money to move the schools. The Daughters of Wisdom, la Bonne Sœur Marie, called Saint Cordon, gave the piece of land adjacent to the convent for $1 to the town of Ste Agathe. So Mr. Lawrence Violet was a superintendent of schools, and he consolidated. He was in charge of Frenchville, Madawaska, Ste Agathe. And that's, of course, a town manager, Monsieur Silvio Michaud. So these are the people instrumental in combining these schools, moving them to the village center across from the church, and they put them together and they moved 7 rural schools. 2 others were moved to the town office to create a town office. And the last standing school in Ste Agathe stayed on Evariste Gadet's farm, and that was Longfellow School, which has since been acquired by the Ste Agathe Historical, is currently under renovations, and it will be wonderful once it's done in 1 year from now. So we're coming into this little display on the story of the rural school. And now that Ste Agathe Historical Society has acquired Longfellow School and is currently under renovations, this is what the school looked like at the beginning of our attempt to acquire the school. The original school sat on Evariste Gadet's lot. It was used for storage, and as you can see, the front door was taken off and widened, and the windows were all busted out. But as the directors and volunteers of Ste Agathe Historical Society, we got together, a bunch of us, and had decided to bring the school home to our society. We brought the school here in 2019 and laid it on its foundation, but we didn't start working on it until 2020. So we were given our time limit of 5 years to get the construction done. We will have done it in 3.5, possibly 3.5 to 4 years. So I think the accomplishments are good for the little bit of time and a little bit of manpower that we have doing it. But again, like the directors, we have an average of 6 to 8 people every week working on this project. Here we have a typical teacher that would teach in the École d'Agatha with a typical work desk, teaching grades 1 to 8, a mixed class of people. The young students would learn from the older ones because the older ones had acquired a knack of reading, writing, and arithmetic. So of course the younger ones were paying attention to them while the teachers were teaching them the basics, how to make letters, how to create numbers, how to create sentences. So they would start from grade 1 all the way to grade 8. So the older students were left on their own to do the work. In essence, the young students would be mocking them or copying them. So that's how the learning process went. So this is our desk that originated from the convent, but it was a typical desk in the Écoles d'Agatha. Here we have boards that we created for the names of the schools that we had in Ste Agathe, Webster, Washington, Grant School, Lincoln School, Roosevelt School, Wilson School, Blaine School, Coolidge School, Riley School. You notice that they're all important people, named either after presidents or very famous senators or congressmen at the time. So every school had a particular name, but basically every Longfellow School was built on the same principle. Every Coolidge School was built on a particular principle. Every Washington School was built on a particular principle. And we, of course, have all the names of our teachers who taught in every school. For instance, in the Grant School, we had Gertrude Bouchard from 1927 to 1934. Queenie Bouchard from Frenchville taught in 1932, and Sister Thelma Bouchard, Thérèse Bouchard. So these are all names of people that were graduates of 8th grade, that were more advanced than others, that were given a certification that they were able to teach basic, not complicated English or complicated math, or, you know, they were allowed to teach younger students how to survive. And then, of course, with the normal school in Fort Kent, teachers followed their education into the normal school and to become certified teachers. So in essence, these people were all very young when they were teaching in schools. We have a few pictures. We have a picture of Marie Michaud, who was, in my day, my haircut person I went to when I came to Ste Agathe, but she was a teacher in rural schools. She then taught in Montfort School. She, you know, went a long way. We have desks from patrons who have given us desks to display in our new school. We have more upstairs in our school little room, but we have desks. We have pictures of Monsieur Armand Lagacé, for instance, that began his career as teacher, teaching in rural schools. Then it was more difficult to find teachers. They would leave to go to district schools that were established. For instance, Madawaska was established roughly in 27, 28, so they would go to Madawaska to teach. It was a bigger district. They were consolidated in one teaching, in one school, instead of having to go from row to row. And then the teachers were paid an inadequate salary. They were paid $600 a year, I think up to $1,500 a year. And it was not enough to keep a lay teacher and help them survive. In the late 20s, costs were going up, work was rare, taxes were fairly high in towns, so they couldn't afford to pay the teachers' salaries, so they would go to a better town, move from Ste Agathe down to Waterville, move from Ste Agathe down to Portland, etc. These people learned to just follow the money, basically. So they had to consolidate the schools. Thus far, that coming to Montfort School in Ste Agathe was a consolidation of 7 schools, as we said, and the teachers were basically the sisters. The Filles de Sagesse agreed to teach the children for lack of having lay teachers, so they would teach the children. So in essence, this was a birth of our school system, other than the convent school. This was an example of the clock face that the sisters would use, the teachers would use in rural schools to teach children time. You know, when you're a child going to school at 1 year old, it's quite intimidating. You assume that every child knows the time, but they don't. So this was a clock used to teach the children time. This is a tea kettle that was found by one of our patrons that was in a rural school on the little wood stove that they kept their hot water on. Every child had a collation, surtout l'hiver. The schools were not very insulated, so, and they were cool. They had fires, but they were still cool, so they'd have a tea kettle. Some of the books that were sent to us by a patron, the books that were typically read in classes. These are not romance novels, these are fact. And the older children would read these books and keep them busy while the younger children were being taught, because they were teaching from grade 1 to grade 8, as many children as they could. This is an original bell from the school, as well as this one here. This one comes from Montfort School, cracked bronze bell. And every teacher had one outside. Even when I was a child going to public school, they all had their bell. And of course the desks, the various kinds of desks that were available in these little rural schools. Some had these long table desks. Unfortunately, we haven't found one of those, but maybe this will get us one. And some of the items that were used by teachers to teach the kids: multiplication cards, addition cards, division cards. I will not speak French in school because they were trying to integrate children to learn English, to follow the American rule of America is English. So these are some of the items that they'd have. They'd have storybooks for the older children to read. They'd have pull-down maps for children to learn the places in the world, etc. So they were well-rounded education-wise. The children were well-rounded and the teachers were well-rounded, even at a young age of 16 and teaching school, or 15 and teaching school. So they pursued their education further when they were older, but in the meantime, a typical woman teacher would start at 16. So she was just, enough education that she was able to teach these underclassmen. My mom, God bless her, is 93, went to school in a rural school on Flat Mountain up until the 8th grade. She learned the basics: how to add, how to multiply, how to subtract. She learned to read. She still to this day reads her paper because she was able to assume that, and she learned, and if she didn't know a word, she'd ask, what does this word mean? How do you use it? So they, in essence, continued learning through their lifetime. But it was just an example that students weren't obligated to go beyond the 8th grade. And the parents of large families especially needed their children on the farm to help with farm chores. So they'd give them an education till the 8th grade and get them to work and help on the farm, either their mothers or their fathers, and then marry them off so they could have offspring to bring more people to the farm. So they were taught basic skills: reading, writing, arithmetic. The letters on the wall. Every school had these letters on the wall that children would learn how to make their letters, how to write their letters, how to make sentences, create sentences, I should say, and how to speak English as well as French, because the French education was very strong in Ste Agathe. And they learned to speak another language, albeit not well, but they would learn to speak another language. And growing up, I would go to school and English was the rule. French was forbidden. But when I'd come home, my parents would speak to us only in French. My parents would say, you can learn your English at school, good, but when you're home, we're going to speak French because it's our language. So it gave us all the opportunity to speak 2 languages. Some of us better than others, but we try to, and we tend to not forget our French. This is Longfellow School project that we are talking about today. And to end this discussion of Longfellow School, the rural schools, the moving of the schools, all of that stuff, this is the Longfellow School list of teachers that worked here. Bertha Chasse, 1927. Yvonne Martin, 1928. Imelda Frank, 1929 to 31. Jeanne Frank, 1932 to 34. Laurette Albert, 1933. Cécile Ayotte Ouellet, 1935. 1937, 41 and 43. Anne-Marie Albert, 1938 to 1940. Once these schools were moved and consolidated, all of these schools were gone, except for Longfellow School. And again, it is now at the Ste Agathe Historical Site. People are free to come and visit. You've got to use caution getting in the building, but there's nothing. You put down bara. The school is perfectly clean. Our ceilings are done. Our windows are done. Our shingling is done. We're going to concentrate on our floors and our paint. And voila, you're going to have a new old school that will bring back a lot of memories to people. And we've had several people come visit this year and said, my mother went there, my father went there. So, and it was right where it was built in 1926 and 27. So almost 100 years old, the school. And of course, instrumental into bringing these schools, and I'll reiterate this, Father Robitaille, La Bonne Mère Marie, and Lawrence Violet and Silvio Michaud. And this information can be found in the book Les Filles de la Sagesse, printed by the Ste Agathe Historical Society, available for purchase at our historical site. With that said, I bid you a good day.